check. There we go. Woo! Some of you are dreading it now. He's going to talk. What in the world? Well, 3 years ago this month, my wife and family and I moved back from Michigan from Buffalo after being here for 10 years, then serving in Buffalo for 5 years, and to transition as Pastor Brad was retiring after 30 years of being our founding pastor and great leadership through the years. And we were coming out of COVID, and it was a time where we were asking the question, who are we going to be as we move into what we called at the time Cornerstone 2.0? Because in some ways we felt like we were replanting Cornerstone in a fresh way. And one of the questions we really had, and a hypothesis we had, was there's going to be the next pandemic, whatever that is. The next crisis will come. And we found during COVID, it was the great shuffling of the church in America where people went all over the place. And it was like, is anybody faithful? Is anybody stable? Who are we? And we had this hypothesis. Let's spend some time really focusing heavily on what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. And so we started asking, even with our teaching, for many years, we would do 4-week series, maybe a 6-week series. In fact, I remember like 15 years ago, one of our longest series ever, we did the 10 Commandments. And it was 10 weeks of 10 Commandments, but we only did it in 9. Like we did the 10 Commandments in 9 because we couldn't see going to 10 weeks. Well, over the last 3 years, we've been kind of flirting with and playing with the idea of extending and going deeper as we study the scriptures more slowly and really digesting them with a goal of becoming deeper disciples and following Jesus. It's been awesome. We went real long with the book of Acts. We went and studied Ephesians. We studied the Gospel of Mark. We just before this series, 1st and 2nd Samuel for 14 weeks. I mean, we're like diving in and going deep. And people have been responding very positively where they're saying, I'm learning and growing. And I keep hearing this. It feels like we're such a deep biblical church. Well, I would say in many ways, yes, except in one area. Where Jesus takes us today in the Redefined series, we are not a biblical church. Now, don't take that out of context. You could easily take that one sentence. We are not a biblical church. We are not, though, doing it the way Jesus teaches us with where he goes in the Sermon on the Mount. If you're a guest with us, we're in week 4 or 5 where we're going in and just studying the greatest sermon ever preached as Jesus was just laying out how life is to be. And what we found is he's redefining virtually every aspect of our life, including today with where we go, with where the sermon goes today. Let me come at it from this angle. Do you know in the Bible, God talks about the issue of love over 500 times, or prayer over 500 times. He deals with love over 300 times. Today's sermon goes down the money talk. Oh, geez, why did I come to church today? The money talk. But do you realize God talked about money 2,000 plus times? And when I talk about money, I mean money, possessions, economy, and how you interact with the resources that you have in life over 2,000 times. If you do the math of that, 1 out of every 14 verses teach us how to handle our wallet or how we interact with money within the economy of the world. 1 in every 14 verses. In fact, 16 of the 38 parables, Jesus is using the issue of money. 16 of 38. In fact, if you look at all of Jesus' teachings, 25% deal with money. So, if we were a biblical church, we would be preaching on money every 4th week. You wouldn't come back. You're like, I want to be a biblical church. Well, yeah, you don't. You really don't. You don't want to hear a money talk every 4th week. In fact, in the first 3 years, we should have preached on money 36 times. We've only preached on, this is our 3rd time doing the money talk. I dread these days because I know if you've invited a friend, and a lot of you are inviting your friends to church, you're like, why did I invite them today? I want you to hear my heart on this. We've said this before. Every time we have the money talking, of course we've referenced money as illustrations from time to time, but really talking about how do you handle your purse? How do you handle the wallet, the money, the resources God has given you? How do you handle it? And Jesus is in our face beautifully with the way he teaches us. But I'm always going to try to say it from this angle. Our philosophy in leadership around Cornerstone, and whenever we preach about this topic, will always give this caveat. Hear this from 2 Corinthians 9:7. This is our heartbeat behind how we feel about money at Cornerstone. Each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give, how you've felt it in your heart, not reluctant or under compulsion or guilt. For God loves a cheerful giver. If you don't feel a burden to give, don't give. We're never going to put the guilt trip on you. We just want to help you in your walk with Jesus. We just know Jesus talked about money. 1 out of every 4 of his teachings had to do with money. Why? Because of what we're going to talk about today. Money is a highly complicated topic because it has a way of just owning us. And I hope you feel as convicted and blessed and hope-filled as I do as I've been studying these words. And so if you want, feel free to turn back to the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 6, when we hear Jesus' words. I'm going to start, though, in Acts chapter 2. Because it's been interesting as Jesus redefines the issue of all these topics. We've seen he redefines how we see murder, how we see adultery last week, how now money. Like he even messes with us around the issue of just your wallet in general. And by the way, just to be clear, we've been instructing you during this series, if you could every day, read the entire Sermon on the Mount every day. What a great practice that would be. This entire series, you would have it memorized by the end for sure. But some of you, as you've been doing that, and you've been doing the daily Bible reading, you're going to say, hey, you went out of order. Because Jesus, as we talked about adultery and divorce last week, he doesn't just go right into money. He does talk about how you are to give, but then he talks about a different topic, and then he gets into money. You're like, you're out of order. Well, that's because we didn't want to preach on money next week on Mother's Day. You're welcome, moms. Okay, so Jesus didn't take into account Mother's Day when he did the sermon. And if he would have, then it would have been first next week's topic and then money the next one. But he wasn't thinking of us on that one. Anyway, all in fun. But I want to start before we get to the Matthew 6. I just want to give you the picture of the early followers. Like our goal, let's just become the best disciples. So when the next pandemic comes, we're rooted and grounded and not as tossed by the waves of the fear of the world. And this is how the early church was. This is the heart behind them. This is Acts 2, a pretty popular verse. All the believers were together. What a picture of the church. The church was together, and they had everything in common. They sold their property and their possessions to give to anyone who had in need. That's the heart. In other words, generosity is a natural response of a Jesus follower. It should just be a part of the outflow of who we are. And if today you kind of are like, oh, I have a tough time being generous. Again, no fear, no shame or guilt or condemnation. My prayer is that you just have an open spirit to hear what God has to say to you and where your heart is at in this. Because it's interesting. The question is, how could these people be so generous with one another in the first century? These people that were the followers of Jesus, they were poor. Like, how did they do it? They didn't have a lot. Well, I believe it's because they heeded Jesus' teaching that we'll get into today. In other words, they heard his 2 warnings. Jesus lays before us incredible warnings. I want to have you kind of think of today's sermon this way. Have you ever gone whitewater rafting? I went whitewater rafting years ago. My wife and I, before we had kids, before we were willing to take risks and leave our kids as orphans, we went on the Ocoee River down in Georgia. And this is where and we were in Tennessee, so it's that whole long stretch. This is where when the Atlanta Summer Olympics were held, it was on this river where they did all that really crazy stuff with kayaking and all the competition. We were on that river, so there were some class 4 rapids to the point where like, you're gonna die if you fall out of this boat. You know, it's intense. There's rocks everywhere, so much fear, like so much fun, but so much fear at the same time. We were riveted by everything our tour guide said. When he said, on the left side, paddle hard. Not one of us said, what's the exegesis behind what you're saying? We didn't ask for details of all will you make sure you're more clear? Because I disagree with your interpretation. I'm gonna go to the right side of the boat. Like whatever he said, we did because he was protecting us from the trappings of getting sucked under and maybe drowned in that terribly chaotic white water. And that is, I believe, how Jesus is describing the warnings that he lays for us today, the bewares. Because I want to be real clear, Jesus is not anti-money. In fact, what you're going to see, he actually today is going to teach us, I want you to store up for yourself. Did you know that Jesus tells us to be hoarders? What? What? Are you kidding me? He does. He says, store up for yourself. Treasure. Okay. Are you finally with me? Are you excited now for a money talk? I am. This is going to be good. Okay, so let me go back. I'm going to take us back. We were just in Acts 2. So I'm going to show you first the 2 warnings. Warning number 1, a trap has been set. A trap has been set. So I'm at Matthew 6, verse 19. In other words, the world is alluring. The world is gorgeous. Like the world is always going to flirt with you. You know that, don't you? There's always going to be something that you're like, oh, if I only had that, then I would be happy. That's exactly right. And so Jesus is basically like our tour guide on the white water. He's saying, don't fall for the trap. Warning number 1. So here's his verse, verse 19. Jesus says, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. He's really clear. Don't put your trust in earth. Don't put your focus here. In other words, he's saying anything you invest in on planet Earth is going to be ruined eventually. It's going to be stolen by somebody, or or itself will decay. So I learned this lesson the hard way. I was 12, 13 years old, and I was thinking, I'm going to be rich one day. And I heard about these things called baseball cards because I'm a sports fan. And so it was 1987, 1988, 1989, those 3 years. Every piece of money that I got went into baseball cards, and a few basketball cards, and a few football cards, and a few hockey cards. And I loved it. They knew me by name when I'd go in the mall. There was a store that was a baseball collection store, and I loved it so much. So I would mow tons of lawns. I would babysit. Anytime I could get any money at all, it would go immediately into cards because what an incredible investment. I mean, so I had some incredible rookie cards. Mark McGwire, Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, all these rookie cards. See, I wish I had known then I should have invested in steroids. Maybe that would have been a good investment. Maybe mean. I have so many Roger Clemens cards. Like, he was my hero. I was like, oh, incredible. Mark McGwire, I had all these. And then I took some serious money and said, I'm going to start to get some rookie cards or some older cards. And so I got a Michael Jordan. I couldn't afford a rookie card at the time because he had already started spiking. But I got a second-year card, Wayne Gretzky second-year card, Joe Montana. I paid $30 for the Joe Montana card. I was so excited. So then I bought a metal lock box, and I was so excited, put it all together in there, and stored it away. And then I took it when we moved to Kentucky. We moved to Carson City. We moved to Cornerstone, and then we moved back to Kentucky for a year and came back, and then went to Buffalo, and then back, and now we're here. All these years have gone by, and then COVID hit, and I couldn't wait. COVID was wearing me out, and I was like, I need just something happy. I'm going to go buy myself a Lamborghini. And how am I going to do that? Baseball cards. So I went to my lockbox and I opened it up, and this is what I found. The seal had broken on it and some moisture got in. And do you know what it sees? My best cards are completely moldy. Look at this last picture. This is going to make you cry. So I tried to sell it. Didn't make a penny. Not a penny. I thought at least the Joe Montana, like I had a rookie card that I thought this for sure is going to sell. It's not. And then the internet came out, and so, all these cards are already devalued because they're so much more accessible because a lot of people did what I did. So good thing it was only 3 years. So at the time, it was only like 89 or so, and so I transferred all my money, and I was hearing about this company called Apple, so I started putting all my money into Apple stock. And then I heard they fired Steve Jobs. So I was like, that's going nowhere. Apple's going to turn into nothing, so I transferred all that money to Blockbuster Video. I'm rich! A trap has been set. This stuff doesn't last. Even if I did invest wisely and had all this money, I know a lot of people that have a lot of money, and only those that know the Lord and the blessing of truly investing in the kingdom of God really, really have peace in their soul. Because this world never satisfies, and that's what Jesus says. Don't store up for yourself on earth because it will not ultimately satisfy. Now, Jesus, again, isn't against money. And he's not against being wise stewards with the money that you have. I'm not saying don't save. I'm not saying we don't invest. I invest wisely, and I think about the future. But it isn't my livelihood for all eternity. It isn't what I put my hope ultimately in. But I do get trapped. Why? Because warning number 2. I fall for warning number 2 as well. But I got to look at my tour guide. Jesus, guide me in these rough waters of this world that I'm in. And the second warning is this, a couple verses later. Your eyes can deceive you. Your eyes can deceive you. Oh, man, can they ever. And he goes on, verse 22, another warning. Your eyes, the eye, is the lamp of the body. Did you know that? You know that. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? In other words, it's what we learned as little kids. I hope you learn these words. Be careful, little eyes, what you see, what you see. Be careful, little eyes, what you see. Because what you look at is what starts to, back to the trap, pull you into the trap. Because again, the world is always going to be beautiful. She's gonna attract you. There's something about just, if I only have that, then I will be happy. I mean, you can fill in the blanks for you. I mean, because I believe we are the best liars to ourselves. You're probably the best liar you know. What I mean by that is you can justify anything. Well, if I just have that designer purse, then people will like me. If I just have that car, then I'll kind of fit in with the status of where people are at. If my kids just get in that private school and you spend more than you ever thought you would spend because you think if that happens, then we will finally feel stability as a family. If I can just have that. And so if I can just buy that LeBron James rookie card, I'm not going to fall for that again. You see how the list could go on, that new iPhone. The list can go on, and then I will finally be happy. But if you've lived long enough, you know, every time you buy something big, it depreciates, and you start to lose the value. And if it doesn't depreciate, you still feel the pressure of trying to protect it because somebody's going to take it. And that's exactly what Jesus is getting at. So he's saying, be careful, little eyes, what you see, because what you look at will draw you either toward darkness or toward light. So it's a tremendous warning from Jesus as he lays out there, because he's basically saying clearly, there's always going to be somebody who has more than you. Always. Unless Jeff Bezos is in the room right now. And do you see Jeff? Jeff, are you here? But he just got overtaken by Elon Musk a few months ago, or a couple months ago. It's like Jeff isn't even number 1 anymore, and Elon overtook him. But Elon Musk isn't even number 1, he's number 2. Like, what a loser. He's only number 2 for richest in the world. Some other guy in another country is the richest. There's always somebody that will have more. And even if you hit the top dollar, like I've got the most money, you're still not going to have the best health. It's still going to deteriorate. And so like Jesus is just warning us so clearly. Your eyes will deceive you. The world will trap you. So I want to get into just some inspiration, I hope, because after each warning, Jesus lays before us a beautiful antidote, if you will, or put your oars on the other side. Do this instead. So I just said the first warning of do not store up treasure on earth. Look at what he says. But store up for yourselves. There it is. Jesus said these words. Store up for yourself treasure in heaven, where moths and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be as well. Let that sink in for a minute. Jesus instructed us to hoard, store up for yourself treasure on earth, or in heaven, not on earth. Because the earth, it's going to take it from you. I've said this many times before that you can't take it with you. You know, the old preacher joke, you know, you never see a hearse carrying a U-Haul. You know, you can't take your stuff with you. People, even the Egyptians, they tried to put all their riches in their tomb. But guess what? Tomb raiders have come along and taken their gold. You can't take it with you. But Jesus is saying, in a weird way, but you can send it ahead. What? I know where some of your diabolical minds may be going right now, because mine would go there as well. Ooh, that's a good ROI. That's a good rate on return on investment. Well, let's see, if I give 10% to God right now, that at a 12% rate of interest times by infinity, that number is impossible. How does that rate on return, how does that all work? Store up for yourself in heaven. How do I do that? So every time I give it counts. Do I have a bank account in heaven? Have you ever thought about that? How do you store up for yourself in heaven where moth and rust do not destroy and thieves cannot break in and steal? How does that work? Like my mind goes there. So every time I give, does ding, 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 my bank account in heaven is going to be huge because I've given a lot. That's exciting to think about. It's not about selfishness like how we do it on earth. Because every time I invest, I'm selfishly thinking, me, look what I get, like this is going to turn into something good. So maybe I actually will have a future. My kids, like I worry about my kids and I think about money from that aspect, and there's always this pressure. The earth is always like exhausting when you start thinking about me. Well, what's his point? He gets to the heart. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So he's getting at the heart. Have you started to see a theme? If you've been with us the last 4 weeks, we've really seen this same pattern. It's about your heart. Around the issue of murder, that was about anger. That sermon was about your hate for another person. And that went back to the heart. Last week we looked heavily about adultery and divorce. That was about the heart. It came back to, where is your heart? And now Jesus dealing with the next one on money, and he's saying, it's about your heart. I would challenge you to maybe do a little exercise that I do quite frequently, to look at where you're spending. The Dave Ramsey kind, if you've ever heard of him, you know, just tell your money where to go. Don't let money tell you what it wants to do with you. You tell your money and kind of budget out. And 43%, now there's stats all over, and stats seem to lie all the time, but this seems like a pretty accurate stat. 43% of Americans right now literally either overspend the amount of money that comes in or spend the exact amount that comes in, and they have no margin. I mean, that's almost half of every person. 1 out of every 2 of us in this room have no margin. The premise that I have when I think about Cornerstone and when I think about Christians in general, my basic premise is the average follower of Jesus wants to be generous. They want to be givers. Like you see somebody in need, I want to bless them. I hear it all the time. When I'm rich, then I'll be able to give to people. And I'm like, well, are you giving now? Because even the poorest among us in America are still richer than most people on the planet. Just take one of our mission trips. You go on any one of the Cornerstone mission trips, your eyes will be open to how unbelievably the poorest among us in America are rich. It's an issue of priority is what it is. We've let our eyes get distracted by, if I have that, then I'll be happy. We've never come to understand that money is just a tool that God uses to open or close doors. And if you start to really trust God with your money, you actually start to realize, wait a minute, I'm going to pause a little bit and say, God, for whatever reason, I've had seasons, we used to call it our ramen noodle years. Have any of you had those years where you're just like, I can only afford ramen noodles, but we're going to make it as fancy as we can. You know, if we have to skin the cat, we'll do whatever we have. No, I'm kidding. Sorry about that. Like, I'm going to do whatever I can to just get some meat in here and get some food. And so you beg, borrow, and steal to try to get anything for nutrition. But as I look back, our ramen noodle years, which were many years in early days of marriage, were some of the best. The dates were more creative. The laughter was sweeter because we were innocently just trusting God. But as the weight of compound pressure comes with kids and all that, and you do whatever, it's like, my, oh my, the pressure starts to build and your eyes get distracted with, we've got to provide for the kids, we got to do this, and all that is true. But you get distracted and the weight starts to weigh you down. And if in there you stop giving, and one of the things I'm so grateful for with Christine, she really kept saying, let's just keep being givers. Even when we don't have the money, let's keep being givers. So we've always, whatever we have, if we have a little bit of money, 10% of that is what we've decided in our heart. Back to what I said, we have never felt guilty about giving. We just say, this is a part of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And what that has done is miraculously shown us God's provision in ways that we couldn't have experienced before. In other words, you can only see miracles when you're in need. And I was like, we're in need right now, and God miraculously provided. I could give you so many testimonies of maybe somebody was prompted to help us out, and we were able to be lifted, and it's because they're in the flow of what God is doing, and we're in the flow because it was all about the heart, listening to God in the prompting as we go. But the lure is so attractive. If you just have more, then you're going to be drawn in, and that's exactly what Jesus is getting at here. He's saying, don't store up on earth. If you don't have, don't go after it. It won't satisfy you anyway. Find a way to have margin in the midst of it all. It's quite a beautiful challenge here for us. Verse 24 is the same thing when he right after he says, your eyes will deceive you. The world will lure you into darkness. And it will trap you by more debt and more pressure. And then you feel all this anxiety. And Jesus says right after that, he says, because the truth is, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. And then to pull full clarity, and he just lays it out there. No one can love both God and money. Again, Jesus is not against money. He talks about it all the time. Jesus used money, just like we use money, as a tool to open or close doors. But it's the love of money. If you have money, then you feel safe. But guess what? That cancer will still get you. That's my point. Something will get you eventually. So it's not like if I have more, then I'm finally safe. Jesus is saying, who are you going to put your trust in? In money we trust or in God we trust? Oh, the irony of that topic in God we trust on our currency. Fascinating, isn't it? Tim Keller had a great way of summarizing all of this with a statement, the late Timothy Keller. He said this, money will flow effortlessly to that which is its God. So again, no guilt. Where is your heart when it comes to this topic? Because really what money is a trust test. It really is. It's a faith test. Do I really believe that God's got me? Or do I need to worry extra? And again, work hard, make as much as you can. I hope all of us end up with lots of extra money, because then we can live in the freedom of flowing with riches to give away and to care for others around us. Like, that would be incredible. I want that for you. So work hard, invest wisely, pour into your family system. Make sure that you take care of one another in that way. But don't let your eyes be deceived to think I have to have bigger and better. If I buy that bigger house, then I'll be happy. If I buy that bigger car, then I'll be happy. So as long as you long for that next big thing, it's going to get you beyond the margins of that which you have. And that's all Jesus is saying. Check your heart. What's going on? Are you longing for more because you think then you'll finally be happy? And Jesus is saying, let me satisfy the longings of your heart. Because only when you understand that will everything start to make sense. And that's why we call money the trust test. It really is. And I wonder if that's why Jesus talked about money so much. I got to believe that's the core of it. Because you can't love both. Because one is going to sabotage you, and Jesus himself is going to take us. So I want to end here and pull this all together with just asking you 3 really pointed questions. And I wish I was not one of your pastors right now. I wish I wasn't saying this as one of the leaders at Cornerstone, because you're going to misunderstand the motive behind it. Again, if you don't ever give to Cornerstone, no tension. This is between your heart and God. I care more about your discipleship in following Christ. Question number 1, and I make it personal. Am I living generously? And I've been asking these questions for myself. Christine, my wife, yesterday we were talking, and she's like, what are you preaching on tomorrow? And I was like, I'm starting to feel sick. I wish I didn't have to preach. Can you preach it for me? Because I'm doing the money talk. And I was like, they're going to all think my motive is Cornerstone is greedy and just wants more money and stuff. And so I hope you hear my heart in this. But then I told her this. I'm actually excited to preach this, because as I've been processing these thoughts and really owning what Jesus was saying, I was feeling such a joy, because I was like, thank you, God, for recentering me. Because I'm a dad, and I feel the burden of, like, the economy's not looking beautiful into the deep future. And I'm like, how do we navigate this? Are my kids going to be okay? And so I'm like, I want to hoard more for them. And it's like, I feel so much pressure. And then as I've been looking at Jesus' words, it's like, wait a minute. He's got me. He's so got me. The same God who's helped me through my ramen noodle years is the same God who's going to help me through anything that comes in the future. And so it's like, this is so good. So I'm asking, am I living generously? When it comes to the issue of generosity, it really is, it's the default of a follower of Jesus. It just is. Why? Because our God is a giver. For our God so loved the world that he gave. He gave Jesus to us. And Jesus gave us everything by giving up his life for us. So when I give, I'm in the lockstep pattern of my God. And that's when my life feels fully refreshed spiritually. I feel alive when I give. And it's been our whole life. We, as a married couple, for these coming up on 29 years this year. And like, thank you, God, for the privilege of being able to get, 28 years. Oh, I just got that wrong. 28. Oh, man. Anyway, so to move on quickly. Because the issue of generosity is really about, do I want to live, and this is a metaphor I'll keep using back to kind of the river rafting. Do I want to be a river or a swamp? A river receives fresh water and gives fresh water. Think of what a swamp is. Would you rather, better way to say it, would you rather drink from a river or a swamp? A swamp takes. Me. I want. And so, am I generous or not? Or do I constantly have fear? Then that's a heart issue, saying, I don't trust God. Just admit that. You don't have to say it to me out loud. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand right now, but say it. I don't trust God with my money. I trust him with these parts of my life, But I don't trust God with my money. If you say it, at least then you're admitting the truth. At least then you know where you're at. But if you keep lying to yourself, remember I said we're the best liars? If you keep lying to yourself, all you're going to do is keep moving forward with this whole concept of fear, kind of stuff. You're going to keep trying to hoard for yourself. But when you admit, I don't trust you, God, with money, then he can show you the miracle when he surprises you. I love being a river. I love receiving generously from God, and I love to then generously give. And that river flows. But when I get fearful and I know I'm starting to hoard because I'm like, oh, things are not looking good. My kids, I need to take care of them. When I start feeling like a swamp, everything in my life just feels a little bit off. Mark Troy is one of our leaders around here who for years has been one of our generosity coaches and financial counselors. He's a confidential coach. And he says this, just generically speaking, I've noticed people who don't put giving somewhere in their budget, I just love how he said it, it never goes well for them. Because their whole life seems off kilter and it gets out of balance. It's like it aligns your system and everything gets in balance when you're a part of the flow of the river washing. It's like a cleansing of your soul. It's a part of how God made us. And until you realize it, again, no shame or guilt. If you never give a dime to Cornerstone, so be it. But just receive the teaching from the Lord today for us. Second question, and I'll have one more after this and we're done. Am I willing, if I'm not a generous person, am I willing to move forward and start the journey? Am I willing to try? I maybe just say it point blank. Am I willing to move forward and start the journey? I bring up the financial counseling. I'll show this picture here. Take this QR code, go back online and take a picture. Take a picture now, or if you're online, I'm glad you're online right now, take a picture of this if you need this. Their whole goal is just to help you to be healthy. Cornerstone is about wholeness, and we want to help you to be whole and healthy. We talked about it from sexuality last week. We talked about it from your anger issues the week before. Today, we're talking about your wallet. And if you're not healthy financially, you will not experience the wholeness that Jesus talks about in the sermon. He's saying, I want to bring heaven to earth. We just prayed that in the Lord's Prayer. Your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. I want heaven to experience earth. And so I want to experience heaven. How do I do that? I got to get healthy in all aspects of my life. Take a picture of this and sign up for one of these. You can go online and find it under the Care and Prayer. Julie Spoolstra is another one. Just phenomenal people who have helped so many people get healthy budgets. So feel free to sign up for that. And last question, and I'll end with this. Is Cornerstone, and this is an embarrassing one to say and nerve-wracking for me, is Cornerstone a place I want to invest in? The reason I say it's a little embarrassing because I'm like, it seems self-grandiose, like self-serving. Except my budget, my personal, how the board and how the leadership pays me. It's not like if you, a big offering, can you get more money this week? Here you go. Good offering in church this week. That's not how it works, you know. How it works is this. We dream bigger when we have more money. We have a very conservative team, a finance team, and they're brilliant, and I love the way they've been able to help us get through the COVID years, and they're just brilliant people. And when we have extra money, it allows us to dream as a church. Because remember, our vision is you. Our job is to help you, to equip you for the work of ministry, and to help you find your calling. And some of you have grandiose dreams. And I would love to be able to say, we've got some extra money because Cornerstone's been extra generous to pour into, that we can actually help fund and pour into that. This is not just to keep the lights on, though that is true. It is literally to say, the more we all pour into Cornerstone, the more we're going places. Because this is coming up in my 30th year of ministry. I say this from the bottom of my heart, not to manipulate. I've never enjoyed ministry more than I am right now, for one reason. I've never felt like I've been in a church as close to the early church as it is. Like, it feels like there's authenticity, genuine love. We disagree with one another on some topics, but it doesn't get in the way. I have spent most of my ministry years refereeing. I have felt like a babysitter a lot of times, trying to get Christians to behave. And I feel like we're getting it right. And it's like we are on mission. And when you think about a good ROI like I talked about, and people ask me all the time, does storing up treasure for yourself in heaven, does that mean just generosity in general? Probably yes. When you're a giver to people, when you give your life away, it's like you're a part of the bigger story of God. So it's not about tithe, and like people say, should I give my money to the church or give it to this organization? And I'm like, listen to what God says to you. But I will say it this way. The place that pays the biggest dividends is the church. And I say that in serious heart matter because Jesus died for the church. He gave everything for the church. Ephesians 5 says Jesus gave up his life for the church. And the whole point is he's trying to take us to a place of like this is the vehicle through which Jesus wants to impact the entire world. And so right after this service, after the next service, we'll have 18 baptisms. I'm running over to do baptisms over at South Wyoming with the other pastors. Like last week, a ton of confession of sin over adultery, over divorce, over lust, and healing is happening with the counselors. When we give, all the money that I gave last week, like it's a part of that story. Like that's an incredible return on investment. The church is the place that God changes the world with. But again, if you don't give to the church, that's your conviction. No tension in my spirit. But I'm asking you, if Cornerstone's your home, why are you not investing here as well, if you're not? Again, no shame, no guilt. So I wrap with this thought. How is it with your soul when it comes to money? Does it own you? Does it consume you? Does it cause you worry? Then deal with what Jesus is calling you to. And to join us in the journey of what it means to be a part of the flow of what God is doing in this world. Because I love what we're doing at Cornerstone. And I think it's one of the greatest missions and clarity of where we're going. And God is doing something big through us, and we get to be a part of it. And it's so good. So let me pray. I'm going to invite the band to come out, and as they do, we're going to end with this last song of the goodness of God. He is so good to us. Lord, I thank you so much for the gift of your teachings. And while I was kind of dreading in my heart how people could misunderstand where I'm coming from today, I pray that there is just a spirit of hope in this room and joy and a sense of, you know what? God's got it. And you're going to take care of us. And you know what, God? I do trust you. I pray that is what every one of us are saying right now. Like, it's been fun to know as I look at this sermon. I hope every one of us can say, I can check that off the list because God, you've changed my heart through the years. I've started growing spiritually. I've started to experience what it means to be a follower of yours in the area of money. So thank you, Jesus, for your straight up in our face teaching about money, that it won't consume us, but it will be a tool that you use through us to open up doors in this world or to close them. And so help us to be a people that walk by faith, trusting you in all things, including the wallet. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.